Hi, I'm Brian Watrous of VMware Education. In this video, we're going to take a look at how to document the vCenter Orchestrator workflows that we've been developing. This video is part of a series of videos in which we've been exploring vCenter Orchestrator, and as we've gone through these different videos, we've been creating Orchestrator workflows that are increasingly complex. Now it's time to document them. Orchestrator automatically generates the documentation for you. It'll create PDF documents. To create the documentation, all you have to do is right-click a workflow and select Generate Documentation from the pop-up menu, or if you right-click an entire workflow folder and choose Generate Documentation, VMware Orchestrator will generate the documentation for all of the workflows in that folder. In this series of videos, we've been creating lots of different workflows. At some point, we need to document them. Well, the good news here is that in Orchestrator, it's very easy to document your workflows. Orchestrator will do so automatically. You just have to tell us to generate the documentation. So what I'm going to do here to start with is to take a workflow. We actually just developed in the previous video this workflow called Wrapped Workflow. And this is what it looks like in terms of its schema. And if we continue exploring, it has one input, it has no outputs, it has a bunch of attributes. But what we're going to do is document this workflow by simply right-clicking the workflow, then choosing Generate Documentation. It will ask us where we want to save the documentation. So I'm going to save the documentation on my desktop in a file called wrappedworkflow.pdf. I'll click Save, and a few moments later, we have documentation waiting for us on our desktop. So here's the PDF that was just created. And when you open up this PDF, you see here's the documentation for that one workflow. The workflow is called Wrapped Workflows. You should be, but I haven't been keeping up to date with the versioning. But if we had, the versions would show up here. Input parameters are listed here. Attributes are listed here. If there's any input presentation, that would show up in this section. We illustrate the workflow schema. We describe the various elements in that schema. And if there was any source code associated with those schema elements, we would list that source code here. So as you can see, generating the documentation for a single workflow is very, very straightforward, very simple. But take that a step further. Instead of generating documentation on a single workflow, you can generate documentation on an entire folder. Just right-click the folder, choose Generate Documentation. Again, tell us where you want that documentation stored and what you want it called. I'm going to call this documentation Brian's Workflows. I'll click Save. Again, a few moments later, on my desktop, I now have additional documentation. And whereas the previous documentation was showing me just the documentation for a single workflow, here we see the documentation for all of the workflows in that folder. So as you can see, it's very simple to create this documentation. So make use of that feature, and this concludes this demonstration. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to check out the other videos in this series to learn more about vCenter Orchestrator. For in-depth, hands-on Orchestrator training, enroll in the VMware vCenter Orchestrator Develop Workflows class, and connect with other Orchestrator developers online at communities.vmware.com. Thank you.